Hello and talofa once again. So let's talk about Moana, the character, in this video, and then Moe in the next, ladies first. Now, I will be analyzing Moana from a mostly Samoan perspective and meaning, culturally, traditionally, and the like, and then project that onto a more universal or macrocosmic backdrop. And I do that to further demonstrate how Moana is deep, if not deeper, at least in this context, that a film's ultimate worth lies in its visceral human and moral lessons, which far outweigh its fleeting technical achievements. For me, I care about the soul of a story, not the statistics. The power of a movie comes from its lofty substance, not its technical polish. Cinematic technique is important, but merely peripheral. The true essence of cinema is found in its profound capacity to deliver human and moral truths. And so the emotional and principled impact of a movie is fundamental. As I said in the previous video, that I consider more the absolutes, values, principles than the fleeting and the relative. That said, to echo Tui, Moana's father, walk with me. Let's start with the name, Moana. Now, I don't mean to belabor talking about the name Moana, except that it plays an important part and profound role in the story. Shakespeare asks, what's in a name? And his answer is contextually, of course, not much, because he says that, quote, a rose by any other name would smell as sweet, unquote. And relatedly, according to Gertrude Stein, quote, a rose is a rose is a rose, unquote. But the Samoans and others, I'm sure, would beg to differ, because there's a lot in Samoan names. A typical Samoan name is not just a rose is a rose is a rose. It is, in fact, much rosier. Samoan names have meanings, especially chiefly names and titles. They contain history of families, villages. They're tied to the land, events, environment, etc. Another interesting fact about Samoan names is that many are taken from the scriptures, especially the Bible, and is a reflection of the influence of Christianity among the Samoans. The same influence which also abounds in Moana, the Christian influence, that is, and deserves its own separate upcoming video. Moana again means ocean in Samoan and other Polynesian languages, the part of the sea beyond the reef. Hence, Moana proves to be an eponym. An eponym refers to a person, a place, or a thing after which someone or something is named. In Moana's case, it's the protagonist and the movie as a whole. But Moana is more than an eponymous movie. In fact, the Moana eponym illustrates in the deepest and indispensable sense an important Samoan native and cultural concept and tradition called tofi. Tofi means an inheritance, birthright, and assigned or pre-assigned duty. The song lyrics in the movie suggest and reinforce the tofi concept, like tradition is our mission, our tofi, and the land where everything is by design or pre-assigned, which echoes Samoa's perhaps most popular maxim or saying, o Samoa wa uma ona tofi. Literally, Samoa has already been assigned or pre-assigned. Samoa is the island where everything is by design, suggesting a division of labor or task assignment concept, but not quite a caste system, since Samoa is also an open society and social political mobility does exist, something that Moana also advocates in the case of women becoming chiefs, which surprisingly is still banned in some villages. A tofi can be inherited or acquired. In the movie, Moana's more immediate tofi is the Moana. The ocean calls her. But becoming the next great chief is perhaps her ultimate tofi, as she was told even as a child that she will be the next chief of her people, and one that she apparently wants for herself. She tells Tala that she wants, metaphorically, her stone on the mountain, and then almost chastisingly said to her, you're not going to talk me out of it. And we see Moana's more immediate tofi come into play early as a young child, as she is naturally drawn to the ocean. She refers to the ocean as her friend, or essentially her tofi, or tofinga, an assignment. This ocean tofi for Moana is in itself an irony, because a ghost tofi in the Samoan culture is rarely, if at all, the ocean. It's more a man's domain, whether in fishing or adventure as demonstrated in past voyages being men exclusively. And so Moana is a trailblazer, a pioneer, and a wayfinder in that sense. In her first attempt at venturing beyond the reef into the Moana, we see a foreshadow of her being hooked, pun intended, by the ocean, literally and symbolically, with the shipwreck scene in which she struggles to free the rope twisted around her ankle while she's still being submerged. It's a symbol of being tethered to the ocean and the pain and suffering from the red marks and bruises as part of a typical initiation into pursuing and accomplishing her tofi. Now, this Samoan tofi concept, however, is not unique to the Samoans. It is actually found in other cultures and people within a very similar or same framework and paradigm. For example, the Greeks' version of tofi is called telos. Telos literally means end, or purpose, or goal. It is a term used by Aristotle to refer to the full potential or inherent purpose or objective of a person or thing. The word teleological from telos, quote, means relating to the idea that things exist, happen, or develop for a specific purpose, goal, or final end, unquote. Tofi also has a French equivalent in the concept called raison d'etre, which is, quote, a French phrase that means reason for being or reason for existence. It describes the single most important purpose, goal, or justification for why a person, group, or thing exists, unquote. Back to Moana. One of the more moral parts of the story is that Moana's ocean tofi is by no means an end in itself. Rather, it is a means to an end, to a nobler and loftier tofi, which is helping to save her family, her people, and their island by returning the heart of Te Fiti. A difficult task, no less. Tala reminds Moana that the ocean calls her and ultimately to return the heart in order to, quote, save us all, unquote. And though Moana starts her journey and arc with a seemingly personal, indifferent, and self-seeking attitude, focusing more on her anticipated stint with the ocean, she does undergo a change and growth by realizing that she is not just Moana per se, but Moana of Motunui. More on that later. The way Moana goes about pursuing her loftier and nobler tofi, saving her people and eventually become the next great chief, is perhaps more important and noteworthy. Though her tofi seems personal, she has to lose herself, literally and figuratively, in the service of others to get it. There's a common phenomenon about accomplishing a goal, especially if and when given only two choices or paths, one easy and the other hard. And while many would prefer the easy and convenient path, real warriors and heroes choose the harder one always, the so-called path of most resistance, the one that is difficult with lots of dangers, risks, pain, challenges. But in the end, the hero learns a lot more and experiences much growth from hardship and adversity. Opposition and challenges, and do it well, build strength in body, spirit, character, soul, and being. A far more worthwhile reward. Now, in order to understand better this part of the story, one needs to have some knowledge of the Samoan culture. It helps with the overall moral of the story. Moana, as the daughter of a chief, and not just any rank-and-file chief, but a paramount chief over the whole island of Motunui, and therefore Moana naturally becomes the Taupo, the island maiden or the paramount woman of the island, a status and rank even her mother doesn't hold. By virtue of such status and birthright, Moana automatically becomes the chief herself, through traditional norm and order of succession, let alone as a woman. As a chief in waiting, though, her role is simple and easy, which basically involves attending traditional ceremonial functions, celebrations, etc. She does not do any hard manual labor or work. She does not even cook, much less fish, in the Moana. She basically performs menial duties at home and waits her turn as she comes of age to become the next great chief. Ideally, she does not hang out with the islanders or villagers. She needs to stay on a pedestal, so to speak, as a representative of grace and high moral standing, of being the taupo or virgin of the island. That's the easy and convenient path to becoming the next chief. Simply
Just wait until she's old enough. It's a birthright anyway. Her tuinga, or ceremonial headdress or crown, is already made and prepared.
But Moana is not your typical paramount chief's daughter, and she's not a snob either. She chooses to hang out with the people, whether in island projects, serving others, and dancing and socializing with everyone. More importantly, she chooses the hard way to accomplish her ultimate tofi, albeit in a seemingly nonchalant, casual manner to begin with. But deep inside her, however, she understands that she needs to earn her status as the next chief. So she ventures out, leaving her home like the proverbial hero, to perform very important, what Samoans call tautua, or selfless service and duty to family and community. Tautua is, quote, a core cultural value within the Samoa, the Samoan way of life, that represents selfless dedication, duty, and active contribution to one's ainga, or family, village, church, and community, unquote. Tautua is hailed in a common Samoan adage that says, "O le ala I le pule o le tautua." The path to authority and leadership is through service. Basically, to become a chief, one needs to tautua first, to serve, and not to be served. And so Moana's tautua to her family and her people is through conquering the ocean and herself, in personally committing to returning the heart despite facing challenges and even experiencing some misgivings and hesitation along the way. At one point, she says that someone else needs to do it. Maui, Tala, and others help as mentors, but during the most critical part of the quest and the denouement, she goes about it and through it alone. Again, Moana does not choose the easy way out. She wants to prove herself worthy of becoming the next great chief. Now, as promised earlier, let's talk about Moana of Motunui. Speaking of names, with the Motunui tag, Moana now becomes more descriptive and qualitative. She adopts this new fighting faith or mission statement: I am Moana of Motunui. In fact, this added part of our identity of Motunui is yet another Samoan cultural concept called Fa'asinomanga, which means, quote, identity, heritage, or sense of self. It describes your roots and where you belong, unquote. In other words, according to the movie, it's who you are, who you really are. And so as Moana starts to adopt and procure this new tag and sense of identity, it becomes an epiphany and manifestation of her growth, of coming out of her shell, pun intended. And she remembers what Tala tells her to, again, remember who you are. Remember your fa'asinomanga, your identity. And with this new knowledge and inspiration, she starts to be more aggressive, committed, and serious in her resolve to return the heart. It's from realizing that she's not just Moana per se, but Moana of Motunui, meaning that she is part of something bigger than herself. She is part of an ainga, or extended family, a village, a community. Her identity has been writ large. And in essence, her focus now shifts from herself to others, from selfishness to selflessness. A quality she learns early in life, to be considerate and caring, like the time she saves the turtle from the birds on the beach, as well as the time in the scene where she serves food on a traditional food mat, or laulau, to, and this is important, others first, and then her parents after. All in all, Moana is an ideal. She personifies a model person and human being. Although she starts her ocean adventure seemingly as more of an introvert, to use the term loosely, she soon realizes that through serving others, she becomes a better person, understands her true potential, and ultimate trophy, and eventually achieves what Maslow calls self-actualization. And so, speaking of universality, do you think Moana has universal relevance and appeal? Definitely. But if you still think not, then maybe consider this qualification from perhaps the most universal book. Quote, "And whosoever will be chief among you, let him or her be your servant." Unquote. Please like, share, and subscribe, and tune in to my next video on Maui. For now, so long, so forth.